That is another issue that we see relative to artificial intelligence.
So lethal autonomous weapons is clearly part of this topic.
Precisely. Lethal autonomous weapons are based on artificial intelligence. You will hear a lot of terms related to lethal autonomous weapons. Lethal implying that it has the capacity to kill. Autonomous implying that it can do it by itself without human interaction. You'll hear things like LAWs, which is lethal autonomous weapons. AWS, which is autonomous weapon systems. And FAWs, which is fully autonomous weapons. Everyone still on board with me? Yes, artificial intelligence, it can kill you. Okay, next plank. Let's build it up a little bit more. Biotechnology. This isn't going to get more optimistic. Biotechnology is just the integration of technology with human biology. The main area where we think about biotechnology is in the development of something called gene editing. Gene editing. Anyone know what gene editing is? Gene editing. Well, gene editing is when you literally take aspects of the human genome, like the thing that humans are built with, you start by changing the basic fundamental foundations of the human genome, and you can basically customize humanity.
Hello, isn't that eugenics? Is that not Nazi propaganda?
We're developing it, and it's growing significantly. There are a couple of ways that it works, but the one that's really emerging now is something called CRISPR. And what it does is it basically gives you the ability to change any aspect of the human genome that you can desire. Now, ideally, in a good and perfect world, you would use this to, treat diseases or something like that. Who knows? But the big ethical conundrums are: one, how do we develop them? Two, can we use them for nefarious purposes? And three, is it ethically moral to change a human's build-up and code, even if the end result is something good, like eradicating disease?
The latest James Bond movie, the major weapon, the major plot was that there were people who stole the British ability to make targeted biological weapons. So that biological weapons would get some of your DNA, and they would be targeted to kill people only with that particular DNA. So they could actually use a very targeted biological weapon to spread a disease that would be highly contagious, but only affect the people who, everybody would get the disease, but it would only kill somebody. So you would put it into the society, and you put it close to somebody, there to get to them, and then their bodyguard or somebody would walk around that person, and they would get badly sick and die. That was a major plot device of the last James Bond film.
Does that actually exist?
TBD. Right now, you have no clue, but technology is always growing. And also, let's be very clear: if a government institution developed a weapon that could eradicate parts of the population, it's not going to be.
Part of the subplot was they could program it to take out certain ethnic groups. If there's certain ethnic groups that had a particular part of their DNA in a particular way, you could target not just individuals, you could target large swaths of society as well.
Is anyone terrified so far?
No, this sounds awesome.
Okay.
You just kill a whole race?
Anyway, the long story short is that most of the emerging technology that's developing right now is developing in a way that is quite literally out of science fiction. And cybersecurity is no different. So, yes.
I don't know. Why do we think that biotechnology was a good thing in the first place? Was nobody in the room oh my God, this is Jesus? No.
If I told you I could cure cancer, would you let me?
No.
Why would you?
Because the way you're curing it.
I just told you I want to cure cancer. Let's have a discussion.
That's the only thing you told me.
Yeah.
I want to know the way you're gonna do it.
Okay, so the way that Yeah, the way that I want to cure cancer is the way we cure every disease. I experiment with, rats, other rodents, rabbits, whatever. Yeah, sheep, things that share 97%. No, no. 97% of their DNA with humans. Yeah, have you ever worn lipstick? They tested it. The pure thing is that I can experiment with animals. Eventually, I will be approved for clinical trials on humans, which is the same as every single experimented drug ever. And then eventually, I will cure cancer.
I'm asking about the way you're doing it.
Yeah. You don't think the end of cancer sounds incredible?
I'm talking about the process.
Yeah, I get it. But the end of cancer is it's a pretty attractive end result.
What's the process mean?
The process is no, the process is the same experimentation that's been done for every product ever made.
Wait, don't they have the mindset of
Precisely. We'll talk about that in a second.
They have test rabbits. Wait, do you know that
Yeah.
story? You know that story like, like the society takes to society. Society, there's a child at the bottom of the
Yeah.
city.
Ooh, we're not. Nope. That terrifies me. Ooh.
What?
Cybersecurity, people. So, cybersecurity implies our ability to protect digital assets that are basically built with computers. So the term cybersecurity evolves a lot, but it's the term that's most relevant to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. NATO cares a lot about cybersecurity because, as I mentioned before, we are integrating all of our assets, everything that we have, our satellites in space, our nuclear weapons on Earth. We're integrating all of it with technology. Our drones obviously have some elements of technology attached to them. So if somebody hacks into those, it would be a problem, correct? You wouldn't want me to hack into like a biological weapon or even just a regular bomb. Like if I have a technological bomb that could blow up 100,000 people, maybe you don't want some random stranger having the codes. That you won't give someone the code to your iPhone. So I don't think you give them the code to a technological weapon.
Mine is a 16 you can guess it.
I can Google it, but cool. Anyway, the point is that cybersecurity is a major problem right now. And part of the reason why it's become a problem is because all of our assets are tied to it. Increasingly, certain powers are now seeking cyber operations as part of their traditional military engagement. So I want to talk to everyone about the development of military fighting. So what do you think wars were in 500 BC? Describe a war to me in ancient Greek civilization. Swords, armor. Yeah, after glory and gold. Sure. What do the wars look like? When I say tell me about an ancient Greek war, what do they look like? They were all on the battlefield. Okay. Who thinks a war is fought like that now? Like a major, let's describe, tell me about World War I. What did World War I look like? What did World War I look like? Anyone have any thoughts? Can you describe World War I to me?
World War I was
Mm-hmm.
And then it comes around with.
But what did the fighting look like? Yeah, there was some naval combat. But for the most part, the thing that determined, or the thing that was a major change for World War I was something called trench warfare. So World War I was fought in 1918. Well, yeah, 14 to what was it, 18 or 19? Oh, okay. No, it gotta be 11 to 14.
1918, my bad.
Okay, cool. So it is 1918. Well, there is a genuinely the progression of war in 100 years from 1918 or 1919, the end of the war, to 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, the progression of technology in 100 years is more radical than the progression of war from 500 BC, literal thousands of years until that point. We have developed more in 100 years than we did in the previous 3,000, as far as it goes to fighting wars. Mm-hmm. They do to some degree, but they don't have to anymore to a much larger degree. So in World War I, the things that were influenced were trench warfare and chemical weapons. Then we came up with a convention to ban the use of chemical weapons. We were like chemical weapons. No, Vietnam was in the 60s. So Vietnam came way after. But people still broke those rules. World War II, we developed even more military technology in the 40s, and notably, we developed a nuclear weapon. The United States, as part of the Manhattan Project, developed a nuclear weapon and develops, to this date, the most dangerous weapon known to human existence. We dropped the bomb in 2 places, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We terminally end the war in Japan, the last stronghold, and then we try our best after debuting the greatest weapon ever invented to make sure that nobody else gets it. Surprise, we failed. Yes. Yeah, we dropped what would arguably be called chemical weapons. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The United States broke a rule it invented. Anyway, this is to say that we've been developing our technology a lot, right? Everyone understands that technology is developed rapidly. Well, when you develop that much technology, you need to develop a way to keep it intact. And our cyber assets are the way that we do it now. But other countries have caught on as well. In the same way that other countries, when chemical weapons were developed, once one person got it, everyone got it. Nuclear weapons, they were developed, one person got it, everyone got it. Now, the United States has, to some degree, mastered cyber operations, right? We can fight wars digitally, right? We can fight wars with something called hybrid war or offensive cyber operations, where we can attack people's assets instead of.
What does that mean? Give me an example of going to a war, because it sounds like you're saying we could just get a computer and go to war. I mean, what does that mean?
Here's what I'm saying.
We kill people with computers now?
Yeah.
In what way?
We've been killing people with computers for a minute. But if I wanted to, I could hack into financial institutions based on your country and theoretically bankrupt you. I could send your entire economy into a collapse. I could institute a national famine and national resource shortage just by hacking. Yes. Fraud is a perfect.
What is it? I mean, what is it?
Fraud.
Okay, but how can fraud be war? Can you explain to me how what you said could actually lead to people getting killed?
This is why the term is called hybrid warfare, because it implies that we use multiple things in order to establish war. So if I were to bankrupt your economy let's say you had a central bank, and I hacked your central bank, and I took all the money out of it. Well, guess what? Now you have no more money to buy basic products, including food and water. You don't have enough money for shelter. TBD. Your research will determine how much you find of this. But as a result, people no longer have food. They now hate the people in charge because they are hungry. What do? They rebel. It now destroys the country from within. If there is a rebellion inside a country, a deposition, a coup, I can destabilize a region. As a result of destabilizing the region, you then need somebody to come stabilize it, right? Your people are dying. You're killing each other in the streets.
So that's where problem comes in.
Now I come in, I take advantage of many of your natural resources, and congratulations, I have now started a civil war without having to leave the comfort of my home until you were dying. Then I came, reaped the rewards, and left.
There's a movie, that came out in 2007. It's one of the Die Hard movies. Die Hard 4. That actually was seen as a perfect way to describe cyber warfare because it's actually based on a magazine article that someone wrote about what a cyber war would look like, where they shut down the banks and they shut down the lights to shut down a city, and people in hospitals died, right? If you shut down electricity, that means everybody who's in that hospital who's receiving critical care cannot receive critical care. If you shut down a nuclear power plant or play with it, you can set a nuclear power plant into the point where it could go into a meltdown, right? You could do all sorts of things to destroy the power grid, to destroy various our water supply system. You could tank our water supply system by using cyber warfare. So that movie is actually, we might have a movie day where we watch that just so people can see realistically what it is that cyber warfare actually looks like.
Perfect. In addition to that, another thing that we're very, very capable of doing, it gets worse, don't worry, it gets worse. Another thing that we're very, very capable of doing generally is disinformation. So if we want to destabilize an area, it's very easy for us to, start pushing disinformation, start pushing things that generally destabilize the public's perception of multilateral institutions. And that, my friends, is the way that the Russian government is most engaging in cyber warfare right now. You've probably heard the terms alternative facts, fake news, disinformation generally. Right, propaganda. You've heard a lot of these terms, and you've seen in the United States what this can generally result in. Yes. Oh, you think, but all that stuff. Yeah, all that stuff's in the future. I want you to remember that the nation you live in currently is attempting to take a president to potentially to court and jail over an insurrection, which we haven't seen since the 1800s. We don't know. We don't know what he's going to jail for, if he's going to jail. All we know is that arguably the most real of the threats so far has been the disinformation threat. None of the other threats have caused an insurrection. Potentially. It all comes down to how you think about threats, which is what I want to talk about next.
And it's kind of like you're saying that, like Masoma, you're saying that information is the biggest threat, but the way we perceive reality makes us act. Like right now in the United States, 70% of the Republican Party believe that the election was stolen. And in the United States, right, culturally, if you believe that there's no democracy, then what are you justified doing? Like the Declaration of Independence. What is the Declaration? Our founding document says what? If there's no democracy, if you have not had a say in the laws that affect your life, what does the founding document of the United States say you should do? Right, to kill people.
Oh, really? We can do that?
Absolutely. Well, I mean,
no, we shouldn't do
I'm saying
no, you should
the
not.
founding document of the United States justifies political violence.
No.
Right? Yeah. So in the United States, a justification for political violence is a lack of democracy. That is seen as an acceptable time when you commit violence. Like that's what the Declaration of Independence is about.
So that's what it's
Right, Pence.
Mike Pence.
Right. Because they're like, hey, they have taken away democracy. We, the people, are justified in revolution when democracy does not represent us. As in, when there is no structural democracy, the election was stolen. And so you have 70% of one political party thinking that they have the justification for committing political violence right now. If that is political disinformation, if a lot of that's coming from Chinese or Russians, then that potentially is a threat to U.S. security coming from within. Yes.
I have a question. So, was that 70% statistics from a certain age? Was that all overall
I'm not sure, but it was of the people, of the Republicans that were polled, 70% of the ones, right, 70% of the Republicans who were polled in the Washington Post poll, basically were like, the election was stolen. So that's 10 Republicans, 7 of 10 think that the election of 2020 was actually stolen, and that Trump is the rightful president.
That's what disinformation does, it makes them think they're oppressed.
Look, the reason why people are doing this is irrelevant. The point is that we know the technique, right? We understand the tactic that's being used, and it's legitimately causing political instability. Now, you are free to believe that that is not a threat, and in fact, if you were debating against this, you may very well have to say that it's not a threat. In fact, we've had whole topics about whether or not disinformation constitutes an actual threat. The evidence is there that says it is, and the evidence is there that says that it is not. The point is that it's up to you to determine what that looks like in a given debate. The last thing I want to talk about very quickly is the NATO framework in cybersecurity. So all of this, everything I've described to you so far is about single countries, right? There's political instability in a single country. You know, perhaps they hack the United States, or they put disinformation in the United States and that causes violence. But why is it so necessary that a global organization emphasizes cybersecurity? Anyone? Why is it so important that NATO, a global organization, emphasizes cybersecurity? Yes?
Because if NATO does it, that means that a whole bunch of countries are, like, NATO in itself is a whole bunch of countries, so if NATO emphasizes cyber, like, security in general, that means all of those countries are going to have stronger, like, security, and that's probably going to other countries.
That's spillover is definitely true. Any other ideas? Well, the answer lies in what NATO was meant to do. So remember, NATO is meant to protect the security of its allies against threats, right? You all understand that component?
Yes.
NATO is a treaty, or begins with a treaty, and every treaty comes with articles, certain things that have to be done in order for the treaty to, be fulfilled. The most important one in my mind, and some may disagree with me, but I think it's the most important one, is Article 5, the Defense Pact. Article 5, the Defense Pact, reads, the parties agree that an armed attack against one or more of them in Europe or North America shall be considered an attack against them all and will assist with armed force if necessary. So basically, the principle is we are a group. If you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. That is the principle of Article 5. Everyone understand that so far? But that also begs a question. Yes? I absolutely will. Article 5 says if you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. But that begs the question, what does it mean to mess with you? Yeah, but how is that? So normally we thought of it as an armed attack, right? An armed attack.
Like, when is the only time Article 5 has ever been officially used? Nope, because NATO was formed after World War II, right? Right, so that was after World War II. So when is the only time NATO was initiated?
Well, we mobilized under Article 5.
Yeah, Article 5 was called, something happened, and then it was like, oh, we all in now. When did that happen? It's been 20 years.
Abel.
It's been 20 years.
Been
20 years.
9/11?
Right.
Oh.
On 9/11, right? On 9/11, 9/11 is the only time, 9/11 is the only time in history that Article 5 has been triggered. And that is why all of the NATO countries went to Afghanistan. Yes.
Yes.
What was a report that any countries besides America or the United Kingdom did anything to anybody who was involved in that?
Well, no, NATO as an entire institution. Cool. NATO as an entire institution usually.
Oh, that's. Yeah, it's just.
Yeah, I don't know if we want to.
Yeah, it's just what we're doing today is the AF and the DISAF, right? The AF, case arguments, DISAF. So it'll be the AF, what are the three arguments that be made in a particular case. Like, there's an inherent problem in the status quo, playing something right. And what is the one job of the negative? The two case arguments, solvency and no inherency, and then the dissent, the off-case dissent.
So, sorry, where we? Oh, right. So Article 5. Article 5 is modified by Article 6. So Article 5 says, if you mess with us, we all come for you. Article 6 explains what it means to mess with you. So it says, for the purposes of Article 5, an armed attack on one or more of the parties is deemed to include an armed attack on the territory or any of the parties in Europe or North America, the Algerian departments of France too, and then a whole list of other places. It just says this is where you can't attack. If you attack any of these places, it counts as an armed attack. There's just one problem. It still didn't define an armed attack. So what's an armed attack? Okay, physical. You seem to be, you gesture to guns. What is it?
Land.
Okay, so I have to physically attack you?
So do I have to use weapons for it to be an armed attack?
Oh, yeah.
If I don't use, wait, so here's the question. If I don't use weapons, can it be, like, if I don't use, like, military weapons, can it be an armed attack? Here's the question, but I'm asking, can you answer that? If I don't use, like, military weapons, can it be an armed attack?
Okay, so you're saying it's not armed if it doesn't include a weapon?
No, I said you can't, I'm saying it can't be considered an attack, because you just said the whole time it was activated, which was 9/11 happened. 9/11 was
Well, no,
Yeah, they
I
have
would-
box cutters,
Yeah,
right?
I would argue, crashing a plane into a building.
No, but I mean, the weapons that they had were the weapons that they actually utilized were box cutters and then a plane, not necessarily military grade weapons, but it was still triggered it because it was actually an attack, right?
That's what I just said.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so that's interesting. It also includes an attack on the forces, vessels, or aircraft of any of the parties. Now, all of these terms, the issue that they have is they're vague. So for example, based on everything you've said so far, if I were to hack into, let's say, a military institution, like if I were to hack into a military institution and steal your data, well, I didn't blow anything up. I didn't push a plane anywhere. All I did was digitally hack into your stuff. Is it an armed attack? It's not an armed attack. Okay, so there are two problems here. Either Article 5 is insufficient at dealing with the most likely forms of attacks that are coming now, which are cyber attacks, or it's too vague to deal with it ever. It's possible. The answer to that is inconclusive. But you now see why there's a problem with the treaty, right? No matter what its initial purpose was, the development of new technology means that we need to update the way that we think about what is a threat, what is an attack, when do we intervene? Yes. It could have been, but the reason why is irrelevant. An affirmative should get up and say, we need to do something about this. Remember, every affirmative needs to describe an inherent problem in the status quo and needs to describe a solution to that problem. So if you're AF, you should say, this is a problem. The fact that we cannot respond to Russian cyber attacks, I would say is a problem because I'm AF. Well, that's one thing you can say under the resolution. The resolution is made massive, massive. And this is an element of the resolution that I think is important to talk about very quickly. This resolution is about military to military engagement. It opens itself up to the largest conversations of potential conflict on Earth. Global intermilitary conflict. I'm talking bombs dropping, guns firing, the whole 9 yards. Right? The reason why is because it makes for an entertaining and full topic. It can sustain a year's worth of conversation, and there's a lot to talk about. So that's the reason why the topic is set up this way. But there are plenty of conversations you can have about the topic that are not built around the largest, situations. As you all mentioned, right? You don't think that the disinformation stuff is like that wild, right? I said you could drop a bomb somewhere and literally, blow up an entire population. I said you could hack into people's infrastructure and you could take all of their money and plunge their country into chaos. And then I looked you in the eye and said, fake news is the biggest threat to the globe, despite the threat of all of these things. And each of you looked at me like I was speaking.
I didn't do that.
Yes, you did.
No, I didn't.
I blame you.
No,
I blame you.
But I blame you because what does this?
Disinformation.
Yes.
I gotta tell you
I
something.
agree with
Regardless of disinformation, no amount of people being educated will stop that.
We'll stop disinformation.
Put dumb people
No,
in
not
power.
disinformation.
Hold on.
No amount of education would stop any war that would ever happen.
Are you sure?
I'm positive. Because what
I think
They're passive.
is the starting line of why problems start.
Look,
not wars.
Yes, it is.
If I'm Russia and I'm like, I'm gonna bomb your country or I'm gonna go colonize your country, what part of somebody being educated is gonna stop that?
Everyone has started off.
well, right now the Russians aren't bombing anything. What they're doing is hacking people's stuff.
Yeah, okay, but I'm saying, what amount of education is gonna stop that?
It might not.
People in, let's say.
You're right.
Let's say-
Education may not stop that. You know what might stop that?
Well,
A plan by the North Atlantic Treaty Organization in the United States to increase security cooperation on cybersecurity. So you see how that's a problem, and then we have a resolutional plan that can solve it?
Yeah.
But similarly, what I'm saying is that there are other scenarios, the ones that don't result in the worst forms of violence ever, that are still real problems. Let me ask you a question. If I told you that right now, we were using artificial intelligence to destroy places in Africa and East Asia.
Why?
Why doesn't matter, because we want to. We feel like it's crucial to national security. And if I told you that in the near future, everyone was going to use, every time they see a problem, they hit a button and they go find their opposition and they just start randomly firing indiscriminately.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm asking you, is that a problem?
Yes.
Yes, obviously.
Do you think that problem is real?
Yes.
Do you think that problem is bad?
Yes.
Do you think we need to solve that problem?
Yes.
Do you think we can develop a plan to solve that problem?
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about it. I would like to debut to you parts of the affirmative that you'll be working with for the rest of the week. It is done specifically to resolve that issue. And the issue involves what we talked about before. Lethal autonomous weapons. Plan. The United States federal government should substantially increase its security cooperation with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization to prohibit artificial intelligence in lethal autonomous weapons systems. So, what does this mean? What does this cluster of words mean? Like as an action, simplify it for me. Yeah, the plan. The United States federal government should substantially increase security cooperation with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization to prohibit artificial intelligence in lethal autonomous weapons systems. Yes.
I think this means that the U.S. is going to work with NATO to stop AI. Well, yeah. Well, it's basically going to implement this stuff that NATO already has, so we can kind of ban lethal autonomous weapons.
Yeah, that's precisely it. It institutes a legal ban. So it prohibits artificial intelligence. So it institutes a legal ban on the use of lethal autonomous weapons in the hope that if the US and NATO say that these things can't be used, that they'll never be used again. Right? Do we all understand that component so far?
Yes.
So, can someone tell me what every affirmative case needs? Yeah. Well, what do you need? What are the three things you need to do when you are affirmative? Precisely. Prove something solves it. Last person. Anyone else? Awesome. Okay, so now let's work through each of these together. We know we have a plan, right? So we know the plan is to ban lethal autonomous weapons. Have the US and NATO work together to ban lethal autonomous weapons. Fair? So now we need a couple of things. We need to first prove there's an inherent problem in the status quo, and we need to prove that this plan solves that inherent problem. Not and, or. Or. Yeah, any of them. You can do two, you can do one, you can do all three.
You
We
do
chose
a subset of one, like this is a subset of AI. It does not ban all of AI. It just found a problem, and one of the problems was lethal autonomous weapons.
So we said, ban them. Okay? So we need to prove that there's a problem inherent to lethal autonomous weapons, and we need to prove that this plan, banning lethal autonomous weapons, solves that problem. This document,
Also, can you post the document, please?
I'll do it, I got it. Oh no, my phone. Hold on, everyone. Okay, everyone. Posted. So I'll give everyone some time to get it up. Okay.
Well, you're gonna take a break after. Continue until 12.
Okay, so I have now posted this affirmative. Would everyone please open it? In Google Classroom.
Like it should be looking at words and trying to write down question, because that's the answer. So how to go with that with these stuff. So I'm going to go. I'll let you get started and then go with process. And then you continue the first word.
Okay, so everyone has it up? So we know we have a plan, right? And we know that plan is supposed to solve a problem. Well, what is the problem we want to solve? I think one of the biggest issues with lethal autonomous weapons is the fact that they are used to target people racially, right? Remember, the areas where lethal autonomous weapons are most likely to be used, based on the historical record, happens to be in countries that are majorly Black and brown, right? And part of the issue right now is that while NATO says that it can use lethal autonomous weapons, it doesn't have a great record in terms of developing a position on how to ethically use it, right? So how do I decide who to bomb? Yeah, how do I decide who to bomb?
Benefit to the most.
What benefits me the most? That's an interesting philosophy.
Yeah, because it's literally minority.
Yeah, sure.
What if it just benefited me to target people by race?
Sure.
No,
No.
Why?
I disagree. Have a debate with me for a second. It benefits me to target people by race. I think that's bad. I think I should be more deferential in terms of how I target. Because I think that targeting people based solely on their race is discriminatory and
Well,
because,
why is that bad?
because it kills a series of individuals. Hold on.
He said have a
Hold
debate.
on. Hold on. Because it kills a series of people individually. What is your response?
Please stop this debate.
It is.
Racist.
So it is not. So in your mind, it is not wrong to target people based on their race.
You're
Well, if it benefits me. Now, there are certain people that say that. The reason I think it's relevant to have this conversation is because there are people that say that none of our ethical philosophies should take into account anything except the end result. And I think it's important for you as the affirmative to realize this is indeed a position you will have to make. Because anybody that makes a claim that takes your theory into account, that takes your position into account, and says that there is a disadvantage to that position, implicitly, without giving a solution to that disadvantage, is saying that the benefits of doing this, whatever it is, whether it be racialized targeting or otherwise, is saying that the advantages to doing that outweigh the disadvantages. So you will have to develop a coherent response that we should prioritize racialized violence over others. But we all understand the inherent issue, correct? That they are racially targeting populations. And we all, well, as of right now, as the affirmative, we all believe that that's it, and that we should not do that. So we now need to develop an understanding of why the plan solves that. So each of the pieces of evidence in this advantage, there are 4 pieces of evidence here. Each of these pieces of evidence describes the long list of potential problems that happen as a result of this. The first piece of evidence says that NATO does not have a position right now. That opens us up to plenty of acts of violence. First, it definitely causes a form of racism, right? Not only because it targets populations, but also because military institutions help determine the development of technology broadly. So every one of you that's using a computer right now, that's ever used the internet, you would not be able to use any of these things without military institutions. If you've ever used a calculator, you would not have a calculator if not from a military institution. And everything begins with basic military applications for singular functions, and then broadens to then include civilian use, right? It's quite likely that the iPhone you are holding right now could have been a piece of military technology, and likely would have been more dangerous than the military technology they had in the 1960s. Like, your phone can do more than military tech in the 1960s could, right?
I like a disagree.
I highlighted this in
Why?
like, no.
You're highlighting.
I don't know. I'm also a fan of like light blue, but like for whatever reason I've been using green. I've been using green a lot more. But that's a conversation that we can have during lunch. That's a conversation we can have during lunch. The point is that military institutions help influence everything about technology. So if the military begins by using the technology racistly, what will civilian populations inevitably do? That's true. But remember, the military establishes precedent for how technology is used, right?
Oh, your technology is gonna be racist too.
Precisely. When you get the tech, it'll also be used in racist ways. It'll be used, it's civilian use. If it's military use is influenced by racism, its civilian use will be influenced by racism. So it's about more than just the immediate act of targeting. It's about more than just the fact that, a drone was used to target a civilian hospital in the Middle East. It's about how the mindset that influences that operation influences the future development of technology. Do we understand that? This is what is called a model. So for everything you do, you establish a model for it, right? Let's say you lie. Let's say you lie to someone and you get away with it, right? You get away with it, you get everything you want. Do you think you're more or less likely to lie to that person again?
More.
Why are you less likely to lie to somebody if it worked?
More.
You lied. Let's say you wanted me to give you money, right? So you lied to me. You told me, oh, I desperately need this money.
Oh, I thought you said it didn't work, my bad.
I desperately need this money. I need it so much. It works. I give you $20. Yep, right? Because it worked. Every decision you make influences your model. So if you engage in an action that is racist and because you think it is necessary, and you build your technology on an infrastructure of racism, eventually you will only do this more and more. And the end result is a model that justifies technology and racism being linked together. This is a model that includes surveillance, a model that includes technological discrimination on things like job placement applications, or web pages that inherently filter out Black businesses, et cetera, et cetera. All of these are examples of racial violence that could form through technology. And we are at a crossroads right now for technology. So the last thing that we need to understand is why the US and NATO cooperating is key. Each card in the solvency section, which you should scroll to, the solvency section for this affirmative tells you why they are necessary. It tells you why the US is necessary, and it tells you why NATO is necessary. Does anyone know why it's important for us to talk about why both the US and NATO are necessary? Hold on. Anyone else? Anyone know why it's important to talk about why both the US and NATO are necessary? Why both? I could have just read one card. Why did I choose to read two? Any clue? Yes. Yes, the fact that they both have influence is a part of that. But there's an even simpler reason for why I, in the context of this debate, chose to talk about both of them. Yes.
I was gonna say so that the negative can't change any part of that. Like if you only prove that it's the US, that the negative can just say, okay, it should be the US and something other than NATO. And if you only prove NATO, they can say it should be NATO and another thing. So it's
Precisely. So the resolution asks us a question about cooperation. Remember? Cooperation. What is cooperation again?
When you work together with somebody together.
Precisely. So if I'm proving that cooperation is good, I have to prove that both people are good. How many of you have ever done a group project? How many of you have ever done a group project with somebody that did no work? Doesn't it suck? Man, that's rough, huh? What? Those useless people, right?
Really?
Precisely. And it sucks if it's your friend. Because you really don't want to be mean if it's your friend, but sometimes they just be, man, they're just space. If that person isn't valuable, right? If they don't add anything to the project, then what's the point of cooperating with them? Right? Couldn't you have just done it by yourself? In fact, wouldn't it have been easier if you at least knew, if you weren't expecting, oh, by the way, I needed this part of the project done and you didn't do it. Now I have to spend all night working on the part that you didn't do because you didn't do your job. If I know that I have to do it by myself, at least I can prepare to do it just by myself, correct? So what's the point of cooperating if we don't have a reason why both parties are useful? Make sense? So you need to read a reason why both the United States and NATO are useful. Otherwise, you don't have a solvency claim for the resolution. You don't have a reason why cooperation is good. You only have a reason why, maybe solving a problem with AI is good. Remember, the resolution gives you a very specific prompt. It says you have to prove that cooperation is good, that cooperation between the US and NATO is good, and that cooperation between the US and NATO on one or more of the following areas is good. Security cooperation. So, yes.
I was just gonna, well, this is kind of related to it, but what happens if your opponent is reading something, but they don't get to read, like, they run out of time before they get to read a card that really matters? Can you hold that against them, or like?
You should always, that's different, but you should always, if they don't get to read a card, you should, for the purposes of our debate, we're not really gonna do that. For the purposes of, yes. The question was, what happens if your opponent is reading something, right? So let's say an opponent reads, they're slow, right? They didn't get to all the stuff in their case. And they left off a massively important part. So let's say I'm reading this entire thing, and I only read the US key card, but I don't read the NATO key card. Precisely. That's the reason why, because you get too constructive. So you can make the argument if you want to, but it's always a little bit, people are more likely to let people read new warrants in the 2AC, the second affirmative constructive, because it's a constructive. They get to add things to their speech. Is that fair? Okay. So at this point, I am now both legally and morally obliged to let you take a break as we wait on the delivery of delicious, delicious lunch. While we take this break, I will recommend, and in fact require, that you spend time reading the affirmative case. Specifically, I want you to take notes of key vocabulary terms. I want you to take notes of things you don't know. Write down questions. Take your best educated guess on those questions. Research the questions that you have after taking your best educated guess. And through this entire process, we'll be sitting somewhere around here. You can come find us and ask us questions about the specific evidence that you're reading, right? I want everyone to take advantage of the opportunity to read as much about your case as possible. Because some of you will be affirmative, some of you will be negative.
Wait, what would the negative be?
We'll talk about the negative when we get back. Yes. I honestly don't know the answer to that question.
Lunch is like 5 minutes away, so.
Yes, but I know lunch is coming, and then after lunch, we're gonna talk about